Due to some recent acquisitions, we have become fairly rich in Fender Jaguars, which is kind of a rarity. So today I wanted to do a video looking at these four specifically, kind of check all these out and talk about who each of these is for. I would say 3 of these fall into a really nice sweet spot between value and playability and all that stuff. And one of them is super collectible, and all the value is going to be coming from the fact that it is a very rare color for that year. So let's get into them. If you haven't seen our videos before, my name is Alex. I run a used and vintage online guitar and gear shop called Flash for the Gear, and we specialize in all kinds of guitars like these. If you see any guitars or gear in any of these videos that you want to check out, you can see way more pictures and more info and stuff at flashforthegear.com, which is the best place to buy any of this stuff if you are so inclined. So we got 4 Jaguars to check out here. This one is a Fender Japan Traditional 60s Jaguar. This is a Fender American Original 62 reissue Jaguar. This is a 1967 Jaguar in ice blue metallic, which is extremely aged. And this is a newer reissue from Fender Japan of a late 60s Jaguar from their traditional line. And this is also ice blue metallic, and this is basically a 1-for-1 reissue of this. This is what happens if you smoke too many cigarettes, so stay healthy out there. So we're gonna plug all 4 of these in and see what they sound like. This isn't gonna be like a scientific shootout, as that's just not really our thing, but I wanna tell you kind of my impressions on these, from playability to my impressions of how they sound. You guys can obviously judge for yourselves, and just kind of give you a more in-depth look and some honest impressions of these 4 guitars, and then kind of talk about who each of these is for. So let's start here with the Christmas colored Sherwood Green 60s reissue Jaguar from Fender Japan. So real quick, because I know you guys want to know, we are running through a Strymon Big Sky for the reverb, and then that is plugged into a 65 reissue deluxe reverb amp, which is going into the Torpedo Captor X, which means we don't have to have a live mic on it, so that's really convenient. And since you guys have asked before, I'm listening through JH16V2 in-ears, which are custom molded to my ears, and they sound great. So this first one is a Fender Japan Traditional 60s Jaguar, which is a reissue of the early 60s. The Traditional series is kind of like their version of the American Vintage series. Really top shelf instruments. There are gonna be a few key differences. One of them is that this is gonna have a poly finish, whereas like an American Vintage, as we will see in a moment, will typically have a nitro finish, or at least a nitro top coat. This is a poly finish, but it's a really good looking finish, and the Sherwood Green looks amazing. Nice rosewood board, not the darkest in the world, but it's still a nice one. This one was made in 2022, so it is fairly recent, and this example here is in really, really nice shape. So overall impressions, this is a good straight ahead Jaguar. It's pretty bright. There isn't as much bottom end as you get with some Jaguars. Obviously all of them are gonna be bright, but this one in particular, to my ear, is a little more substantial in that category. That might be because this has the freshest strings. These all have the Dario EXL 110 on them, but this was literally set up like 20 minutes ago. The neck on this one isn't super substantial, but it's certainly not the slimmest Jaguar neck. Feels really nice. The guitar is pretty lightweight overall, so that's cool if that's something you're into. The fit and finish on this one is really, really top tier. I will note it is pretty lacquered back here, and it is a thick finish, so keep that in mind. But overall, really, really cool Jaguar. I would say that this is way, way nicer than just about anything that I've seen from Fender Mexico, and is kind of right there with a lot of other American Jaguars I've played. I would say the fit and finish of this one is similar in quality to like an American Pro that they'd be making right now. I do like that this one has the Mustang style saddles on the bridge, which is not necessarily vintage correct, but it makes it stay in tune a lot better. Fender Japan is kind of notorious for making a really vintage accurate guitar and then taking just a few liberties to kind of make it a little more usable, a little more modern, and this is, you know, pretty par the course for them. This is a Fender American Vintage AVRI 62 reissue Jaguar from 2000, so nearly 24 years old. This one features a nitro finish, so it's gonna be much thinner than the other one. It's already starting to show some wear. Finish is wearing through here. And this one is a little bit heavier. Something that's interesting is this features a Fender mute, which you don't see on either Japanese Jaguar we're looking at today, but you do see it on both of the American ones. And this features the traditional vintage style saddles, which I don't prefer, but this is a more vintage correct spec. Overall impressions is this guitar definitely feels a little more substantial, both in a good and bad way, compared to the Japanese one. I would say the tuning stability actually feels better on the MIJ, but there's a little more vibe with this one. I like that it is a little bit darker here on the back. Fretboard is also a lot nicer on this one, so that's a definite plus. I do, of course, prefer the thinner finish, so this is going to age really, really well over time since it is nitro. I don't so much enjoy that this has the vintage correct saddles, even though that is what you should have on this guitar. I do prefer the Mustang style saddles. And while the Fender mute is cool, it's not something that I personally use, but that may be a pro for somebody else. Overall, I really, really like this one. And so far, it's probably lightly my favorite of the two. If I had this in Sherwood Green, this would definitely be my favorite of the two. We are now on to our third and most expensive Jaguar by many, many multiples. This is the 1967 Fender Jaguar in ice blue metallic. Despite all the wear, this is actually a fairly original example. The nut has been replaced on this one and the tremolo arm is a replacement, but otherwise this is a totally original guitar, which is really, really cool. Once again, of course, has the vintage style bridge, as this is a vintage guitar. And this has the Fender mute, which features a lot less foam than on the last example we looked at. This is a vibey guitar. Let's see how it sounds. In the way I said that the American Vintage feels a little more substantial than the Fender Japan Traditional, this takes that even further. I would say the weight on this one is similar to the American Vintage, where it's a little heavier than the first one we looked at. But just the way this is worn makes this feel really, really nice. This probably has the thickest neck of the ones we've looked at so far, which is cool. So if you're into that, this has, I wouldn't say a baseball bat neck, but definitely pretty thick neck and pretty thick binding on here as well. For a vintage instrument, this actually stays in tune really, really nicely, and it overall does feel really solid. Obviously, this bridge is making things a little bit more difficult, and it's really easy to knock the string kind of out of place on the saddle, but that's just kind of what you get with these. This is really, really cool. Obviously, a lot of the value with this guitar is coming from the color, as this is a very hard to find custom color. And despite its aging, this is what it is. So if you are a collector that's after this, this does check that box. Overall, I really, really like this. I think the price tag that a guitar like this is gonna command makes this a little bit harder to justify for myself. But this definitely feels way different than all the other Jaguars, and it's certainly the most unique and definitely has the most vibe. I really, really like this. I mean, this is the original. This is obviously CBS era, so it is not a pre-1965, but nonetheless, this is a proper vintage Jaguar, and this is the type of Jaguar that, as we're gonna see on the next guitar, is still being reissued to this day. All right, so last but not least is going to be the Fender Japan Traditional late 60s Jaguar. And oddly enough, this was the hardest guitar to track down of all of these. This one was made in 2022 as well as a special run with the matching headstock. It is so crazy to see how different the ice blue metallic finishes are between this one and the 1967 Jaguar. It's also really interesting to see how different the finish is between this guitar and an American Vintage Strat we have in ice blue metallic. Once again, we are back to a poly finish on this one, which is a little bit thicker. So when this wears, it's gonna be kind of more so dings like you see here. Then it is gonna be just straight wear through the finish. This does have the correct vintage style bridge, so that can be a pro or a con, but I will point out the absence of the Fender mute here, which you would have had on the year that this is reissuing. So that's kind of a weird omission. Like the 1967 Jaguar we just looked at, this one does have a somewhat substantial neck on it, which I do enjoy. Let's see what it sounds like. This Jaguar is really, really solid overall, and it's hard to not immediately say this is my favorite, just when kind of factoring everything in. Nice dark rosewood board, the finish is absolutely gorgeous on this, and it just sounds really, really good. This fits right in that sweet spot of what I would be looking for in a Jaguar. So towards the beginning of this video, I posed the question of who is each of these guitars for, and let's get into it. Starting with the Fender Traditional 60s Jaguar from Fender Japan in Sherwood Green. This is a really, really solid Jaguar. This is a ton of guitar for the money. This holds up really, really well against just about anything you put it against. It stays in tune well, it sounds great, and the finish is pretty unmistakable. Very cool guitar all around. It's certainly not the most vibey. It feels just like a solid Jaguar, but it doesn't always have to be quirky. That's just a good straight ahead guitar. The few small modern appointments added to this otherwise vintage correct guitar, I think make this a really, really well-rounded Jaguar. I think this is probably the one to get if you're going to be gigging it and you're going to use it just how it is out of the box. All right, so next we have the Fender American Vintage from 2000. As soon as I picked this up, I knew there was something special here, as it just felt right. It felt right at home, and I love that this has a nitro finish to it. That is the one thing that I think is just an objective upgrade from the guitars that we are looking at today from Fender Japan. Otherwise, like the tooling and everything is very similar between the two. The level of quality is very comparable between the two, but the fit and finish are just a little bit better on the American Vintage. And I really like how this one sounds too. It's a little thicker sounding than either of the Japan Jaguars. And once again, feels really, really well-rounded. I think I would gravitate towards this guitar. If I was to bring this guitar into a gigging environment and put it through everything that it would go through on the road, I'd probably swap either the bridge or just the saddles and get something a little more modern. Other than that, this thing is good to go. This is a really, really solid guitar. All right, so number 3, which is probably the most interesting guitar in this video and certainly the rarest, is the custom color Ice Blue Metallic Jaguar from 1967. This guitar is the most unique by far. It feels amazing. The fit and finish on it is literally just so different from every other guitar here. And it's different from basically any other vintage Jaguar that I've played. Every single one of them is gonna have its own character, and this one really has its own character. Given the price of what this is going for, it can be a bit of a difficult proposition, so I know the right buyer for this is probably somebody who is looking for an Ice Blue Metallic Jaguar to go towards their custom color collection. But I would hope this is going towards somebody who actually wants to take it out and play it, because this plays really, really well. One thing I did notice was kind of funny is because this is such an old guitar and it had small frets to begin with, the frets feel way lower on this than any other Jaguar, and that actually might make more of a playing difference than any other individual spec. While this guitar is still probably going to sell for crazy money, it won't be as crazy as a super clean example. So if you're somebody who collects, but also wants to have guitars they can take out and enjoy, this is a really, really good example of that. You're not gonna devalue this one by wearing it a little bit more, as obviously it already looks like this. It's not gonna be getting any cleaner. The right player for this is not only somebody who has the budget for a custom color Jaguar, but somebody who is open-minded to something that has worn this much and enjoys that uniqueness. If you're looking for something super clean, this does not check that box at all. But if you're looking for an Ice Blue Metallic Jaguar from that year, this definitely checks the box and is probably the most unique example that you'll ever see that's still this original. So last but certainly not least is the late 60s Jaguar from Fender Japan. And it is really tough to choose for me. My favorite is either the American Vintage or this one. They're both super, super cool. This to me has the coolest finish of the 3 non-vintage ones. Obviously the vintage Jaguar has the coolest finish to me, because it's just so unique. But as far as the more traditional stuff you'll see, I think this really nails it. The matching headstock and this uncommon color are just such a cool combination. And paired with this rosewood board, you really can't miss it. Going off these examples, I think this is the one that I would go for. I would once again probably try a different bridge for my own purposes. If you like this bridge, that's totally cool. Not roasting you for that. This is just my preference. This is probably the one for me, but if I was to find the American Vintage in kind of a custom color like this, that also might be the one. But I will say all 4 of these are really, really cool. They kind of all have their own place, and I think there's a perfect player for each of them. As always, I want to hear your guys' thoughts. Let me know down below in the comments which one of these 4 Jaguars was your favorite. Let me know if it was because of the way it sounded, the finish, or just whatever your thoughts are. If you have a Fender Jaguar that we didn't mention on this list, then we definitely want to hear about that too, so let us know down below in the comments what Jaguar you have or which ones are your favorites. There's so many cool ones out there, and this is just a small sample. These 4 were kind of the perfect guitars for us because they all fall into like player category guitars, whether it's something from Fender Japan where it's just a really, really great value for the money, or it is the vintage Jaguar where even though it's a crazy expensive guitar, it's in the condition that you can go take it out and enjoy it. So these were all kind of guitars that hit the sweet spot for what I look for when I'm curating inventory for our shop. But outside of these 4, there's so many other Jaguar models out there. Some of them don't really fit what we do as a shop, so we don't get to see them as much. If you are interested in any of these Jaguars, check the pinned comment down below, as I made a curated collection on our store at aflashforthegear.com where you can look at all of these in more detail. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and share this with anyone you think might enjoy it. I know every YouTuber asks, but it really does help out and kind of help support us doing more videos like this. Let me know all your thoughts down below in the comments. I look forward to reading them, and as always, we appreciate you guys taking the time to watch these videos. Bye.